My name is Ted Lakkides, and I thank you for coming here this morning. Let me begin with a brief quiz to see how awake everybody's is. Let me ask you these questions in rapid fire and just give me an answer. Do they have a 4th of July in England?
Yes.
Yeah, the calendar has 4th of July. What was the president's name in 1950? Thank you. Thank you. People are saying, well, let's see.
I got up early this morning.
I must have. And you drank at least 2 cups of coffee. You're with it, yeah. Some months have 31 days. How many have 28?
All of them.
Gotcha. Yes. There are 3 apples, and you take away 2. How many do you have? Okay, you have 3 apples. There are 3 apples, and you take away 2. How many do you have? Now you guys are saying, okay, what's going on here? You have 1. No, you don't have 1. You have 2. You took away 2, right? How many animals of each gender did Moses take on the ark? 1 of each gender? 1. Moses? Okay. What I'm getting at here is a concept. It's called challenging your critical thinking. There's 2 types of thinking, and this goes back to some of you may have seen this book, Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman. By the way, everything that I've put up here, I've created a bibliography. So if you can go, check it out online. If you want that electronically, let me know and I'll send it to you. So you can just click and get online to do that. But Dr. Kahneman came up with the idea that the brain has 2 ways of thinking, 2 parts in the thinking. One is instinctive, the other one is critical and thoughtful. When you drive home after work every day, part of the time that you're driving home, you're probably not thinking of the direction you're going because your instinctive part is kicked in. If something bad happens on the road, all of a sudden you're all ears and eyes and thinking what may. So those are the 2 systems. He calls them System 1 and System 2. System 1 is the fast, instinctive system. System 2 is the logical. And it looks like this. This is instinctive, something that we were born with, still carry with us. It's part of how we survived for thousands of years to this point. And this is the critical thinking, which is what we force ourselves whenever we need to. I got to figure a way to do this. Force ourselves when we need to take care of the whatever things need to be dealt with. So, continue with our critical thinking approach. Here's a little puzzle. A bat and a ball cost $30. The bat costs $20 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Sure. $5. So 5 and the bat costs 25, which is $20 more than the ball. Like the other trivial questions that I asked earlier, this is similar to forcing your thoughtful part of your brain not to say 10. Say, wait a minute, it can't be partly because you've been conditioned already to expect some lame trickery in my questions. So, I'm a certified financial planner, been teaching and doing this kind of work for like almost 30 years, since '89. We've done and helped thousands of employees of companies like GM, Kroger, Farmer Jack back then, Amerisher. We even did some work out of state with some mining companies to help them build financial literacy in their coal miners so they could retire early. These are the higher paid $100,000 a year people. And it appears to have worked. It does work. Our programs are also currently available through Oakland Community College. They've adopted our curriculum and the things that we do. See, I got it. One of the things that's unique about us, our presenters are not allowed to accept participants in our workshops, in our actual financial workshops, as clients. A lot of people do seminars and say, well, we don't solicit, we don't sell, but depending how you design the seminar, you can make yourself very attractive for somebody to call up and say, hey, can I talk to you? I mean, they make it easy. They're trolling for clients. We prohibit that in our presentations. So today, what do we learn? How financial stress is created. We're going to talk about what's making this happen, what effect does it have in the workplace, and how it can be addressed. Perspective is key. During the boom years, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the post-war economy was driving people into a happy place. Everybody was spending money, living a much better life than they had seen in the prior 5 or 15 years. We saw that with all the building, the cars, the automotive industry. However, during that same time, the old stigma about debt began to erode. And you still get people in their 70s that say, I don't want to owe any money, I want to pay everything off. You try to explain to them, well, all you do is make it easy for your heirs. Yeah, I don't know, I don't care about that part. I just don't like to owe any money. You talk to them about the financial reasons why they should and leverage their money and say, nope, I just don't want. So that's gone away. And today, because of the lack of literacy, or people don't do the math, people don't take advantage, don't learn, don't think critically, they spend money that they feel they'll collect in the future. So they use their credit cards almost promiscuously, and of course we see what happens with that. Not only do they suffer, but the rest of us, when a whole bunch of people make bad mistakes, the rest of us suffer as well. Think 2008. When all these people bought houses they shouldn't have bought, when they refinanced to get rid of their credit cards, debt, and now they have no equity in the house, the market drops, and all kinds of problems that we took, 3-4 years to get ourselves out of. So the cause behind that is a new term that's being used lately here. It's called financial fragility. George Washington University is doing a lot of work in this area. And here's some statistics. They found in surveys that 34% could not come up with $2,000 in 30 days. If they needed money to do some major repair. 46 could not come up with $400 on their own. 49 carry balances on their credit cards. 45% lie awake due to stress. Now this stuff doesn't just occur when you're awake or when you're busy using your credit card. It kind of builds on itself, and this stress, and this is again information from, in this case from the American Psychological Association, 30% stress about retirement. Keeping in mind that the industry, the financial industry, kind of brings that onto themselves, or they create the sense that, man, if you got a problem about retirement. I mean, they build up the negativity of the issues so you can become a client, which is fine for people that need help, but to scare them into a state of feeling stressed about something that they're probably going to take care of already anyway. And 66% stress over healthcare costs. When we do workshops, we do a lot of work for the GM now, the UAW plants, and the one thing everybody sweats about is healthcare. I mean, and yet they don't worry about the $500 a month lease on the Escalade. Okay, that's okay. It doesn't bother them. But healthcare down the road, So it's all a matter of positioning, how the industry does things, and our role is to kind of cut through a lot of this to elicit, if you will, the critical thinking, system 2 of the brain. And at the end of the day, financial stress is almost like a medical condition. But if you have stress, not knowing where it emanates from, it's unlike in the medical field. If you go in with a pain someplace, it needs to be diagnosed, and it's typically connected to something else that the doctor takes care of or looks at helping you with. So as a medical condition, we can deal with that. There's a parallel about financial literacy. There's a parallel to the germ theory. A little weird topic to bring up in a financial seminar. But back in the day, diseases and pathology are very complex. We know this. It's a given, even though most of us are not doctors. But back in the day, they believed that there was, this is back before Louis Pasteur and discovered or made germ theory relevant to the rest of the world, something that they called miasma. In those days, before the 1800s, the early 1800s, people thought that if you breathed bad air, they called it bad air, somehow then you could get sick. So a lot of these voodoo things that were going on to prevent any disease until we found out from the experiments of Lister and Pasteur that there are germs. You kill the germs, you prevent disease. And that took a long time to change. Even today, in many parts of the world, they don't understand germ theory, even though there's a lot of effort by the World Health Organization to deal with it. So stress is there. It's caused by financial shortcomings, along many other things, but financial shortcomings or financial mistakes are unnecessary. It's a matter of learning how to live in the modern world. So, and it's having a way of life. So the financial skills that people possess are terrible. And there's a report that FINRA runs every 3 years. The last one was 2015. And it asks some simple questions. If you're making 2% a year, after 5 years, would you have more or less or whatever? Of course, the answer is more. 25% miss that. Okay? Imagine that the interest rate in your account is 1% and inflation is 2%. After a year, how much would you be able to buy with the money in the account? %40 got that wrong. So they're not understanding the very things that they need to be implementing in terms of their financial decisions. There's a couple more. This is true or false. Buying a single company stock usually provides a safer return than a stock mutual fund. False. Half of them got it right. Half of the people in the 401k are investing money in, they know what's going to happen with, and typically it's their employer's stock that they put money into, and you try to get that out of their head or try to convince them otherwise, you can see they don't know. And the sad part is that 76% of respondents in this FINRA survey thought that they're pretty good, they're pretty knowledgeable about their finances. So we expect schools to educate, and they do, but in terms of financial education, it's extremely poor. The marketing that goes on in financial industry, sales and promotions and so forth, dwarfs the amount of effort being put into education. The schools don't do it. The 1948 meeting in New York to pull together and form an entity to promote financial literacy, which ended up creating what's today the Councils of Economic Education, and there's one in each state throughout the country, and their effort is to do that, to continue that effort, but it's really not working. And it's pretty hard to make it work against the tsunami of the spending going on by the financial industry, who's telling a story more aimed at getting clients, along with educating, but not truly making the people understand the underpinnings to those messages. Another piece that plays into this equation is bias. This goes a little bit to Dan Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. He's the one that kind of made this thing a big deal. But there's behavioral biases. Optimism and overconfidence is probably the dominant one, because you know what you know and you think you know it. You just don't know what you don't know, but you don't know that. So you go with what you think you're good at. A good example of that is all the poor people that have lost money opening up pizza parlors because of their mama's recipe and how she did it and whatever. And they think they knew how to do that because if the recipe is good and it tastes good, then very optimistic, right? Well, that's really one of the reasons 75% of small businesses fail, because they don't know it and they're overconfident. Slavish media focus. People look at the Dow, the Dow when it collapsed or when it was before it dropped. when in its run-up, 3 or 4 companies caused that. Amazon, I think Apple, Microsoft, 3 or 4 companies made it look like the world is on fire. Things are so good. And people listen to the shows because those shows are designed to get people to believe what's being said. Because if they didn't believe what's being said, they would change channels. So a lot of the bias that comes across the screen is kind of on purpose to get you to stay put and not tune away. The herding response. We have a lot of these attributes left over from the primitive days, but people like to kind of go with the flow. You know, if everybody's saying, hey, you ought to buy UPS stock, it's doing great. Or you buy GM stock, look, the company's back before it started falling apart, before the bankruptcy, everybody was saying GM's book value for GM stock was really around $100 a share. So regrettably, we were not convincing enough to get a lot of people to drop out as it started climbing from 50 to 60 to 70, 80. I had a call from an engineer that said, it's going to go to 100, I'm going to wait for it. Of course, a lot of people lost severely in that. And that's everybody can be wrong. Well, everybody can be wrong. But that's a hard thing for people to understand. And the status quo bias. If you've done something a certain way all along, hey, I'm not going to, you feel comfortable, you've seen good results. The bad results, you've erased from your mind. We always think of the good things in our past, the good old days. Well, if you apply system 2 to that, I think you'd conclude that they weren't so good compared to what you may have today, for most people. So, stress creeps in because of all of these attacks to our thinking process and the life that we must live, and along the way, we deal with this stress. Now, there's good stress. The good stress is when you're stressed about the presentation you're going to make, and you're really on your game on a project you're working on at work or whatever. The bad stress is those things that you cannot control. You cannot blow off your credit cards like you can in an exam. You don't want to take the test? Screw it. Go home. You can remove that stress. Cannot do that with your finances. So, the financial lack of education creates stress, and that stress comes to work. People think of this stuff 24/7 when they're awake. So this can affect and does affect in statistics, and the one that's done a lot of most of the work on this is Waterhouse, does affect productivity and retention. Here's the, and they do a survey I would encourage you to go online. There's a website for that, and yet, I mean, just amazing. 55% admit being distracted at work because of finance. 25% admit financial worries affect their health. Now, this has if it messes with their health, that creates some issues with respect to healthcare costs for all of us. 18% admit this affects their productivity. They literally said that, I know I can do better, I know I'm whatever, but they admit to that in blind surveys. Student loan debt, how many people have, a lot of people that have student loan debt, and it's enormous, the amount of money that's owed. And that for the millennials, for the younger people that at work, in your place of employment, that's a big, big bogey. I mean, that's a big anchor. And unfortunately, and we were called into a couple of meetings to do some lunch and learns for a couple of companies out here in Auburn Hills, actually. One of the, that's what they wanted to focus on. And we had about 40 people that came in to hear the information. And they're all looking for the magic bullet. They're all saying, okay, how do I fix it? They were very disappointed in my presentation because they thought, well, there's an answer to this. There is no answer. There is no answer. And the fact that the government may forgive that, I doubt that's going to happen, but it might. It still doesn't take the problem away that you're now paying for 2 mortgages or paying rent for 2 apartments. And the problem really, I don't want to get too far off track, But the problem lies with the counselors and the whole circular economic puzzle that the money is free to go to college. Well, gee, you know, if everybody here was given free money to go to Chili's and buy whatever you want to buy, and you had the cash was just for Chili's, right? You had chits for Chili's, right? That you could go to Chili's next door, and guess what Chili's would do over time if all this money was flooding in? They would likely raise their prices. Simple economics. Universities do the same thing. And nobody at the high school level, at the counselor level, talks to these kids about, you don't need to go to college. You know, go to OCC or Macomb Community College.
Yeah, Ted, when you're talking with those folks, I mean, it always seems to me it's the difference between if a person has a massive level of debt and they're just coming out, in school, they just graduated. It seems to me it's kind of like describing to them the difference between a problem and a predicament. I mean, because problems have a very clear solution. Here, you've got a predicament, and you can approach it intelligently and try to eliminate self-defeating behavior, but it's kind of accepting that aspect. Do you find the majority are in denial?
Almost always. And the way to defeat that, I mean, there's no way. It's like anything else. You try to get somebody to say, you got to lose weight. You got to exercise. Oh, yeah, I will. Okay. I want to. I know I should, and I will. The only way to do it is to create an event. Sometimes those events happen on their own. A person sees a friend die of obesity or something that could be me. I better start taking care of myself. That's a trigger. We create triggers in the workshops that we do. In almost all of them, we come at it kind of like, we kind of sneak it in there in a way to build that up by having them all document a spending diary. A spending diary. I don't want a budget. We're not talking about a budget, so we take that off the table. We're not going to put you on a budget. Just let's take a look. Let me help you take a look at how you're spending your money today. Generally, a good percentage of the people go like, holy crap. I didn't know I was doing A, B, C, or D. That's one good part. But it forces them to kind of look at the totality of their finances. It's really more like an accounting. I mean, if I had a business and I went to a CPA and says, hey, we got about $4 million in sales, and my books are in this basket here. We're doing well. Business is good. I need your help. So, okay, well, let me see an income statement. What's that? I don't have one. That's how we are as individuals. We don't do income statements. We don't do the stuff, but we should. And this is kind of what we backdoor to in these workshops. They do that, and by seeing their own numbers themselves that they've identified on their own, makes it easier to kind of nudge them. That's another thing of behavioral finance or behavioral economics. You nudge people a little step at a time to nudge them to kind of pay attention. And that's the first step. Denial starts with denial, and then you have successive steps to conquer. So a lengthy answer, but I'm glad you asked it. Give me a chance to kind of go off track.
When you say you're doing these workshops, where are you finding your clients, and where are you advertising to get?
We do not advertise. We work with employers typically. More recently, the union UAW has approved our curriculum through OCC for all their plants. So we're doing those workshops now, and we get, particularly with those people, they need help because all the new employees at GM are not on a pension. They all get a 401k. GM drops in some money, and they got to put some more, and they got to manage it. And they don't know what they're doing.
There's a lot of people that don't know. I work for a collection agency, and
Well,
I see it every day.
Sure.
And just because these people owe my office money, they're not bad people. And I will tell you, these are people who just don't know how to budget, and a lot of times it's husband and wife. The other one doesn't know what the other one's doing. Oh, but I let my wife pay the bill. They don't know what they're doing. And these are people, some of them they make good money. They make more than I do, and they can't pay these bills.
Sure.
It's just budgeting, and unfortunately, we can't say, oh, here, take this program.
No, although it should be, will help you if you take this.
I can't.
I know you can't. I know. I'm not saying you can't, but that's.
Like this,
Yeah.
that's why I was saying, if you had something, where you don't advertise, but it's just,
And people that need the.
there's a need
There's a
for
big
what
need
you
for
do,
this.
and at one time, my company, the owner wanted to get certified in this, but it was a conflict of interest. We help, with what we call MACA, Michigan Association of Collection Agencies. We promote project literacy, on our end, to go to the schools and the colleges to do certain things like this, where we fund money into this to educate people about this, because we don't want them in our system.
And we'll touch on experiential learning in a minute, and that's the missing piece in all of the efforts. The money you're spending on that, it's not going to do anything. Hasn't done anything.
It's a start.
And the experiential part is to have them walk through and do a budget. A lot of things we can do naturally. Sex, we don't need any training for that, right? Being a parent could use some training, but it's innate. We know how to be parents, if we're reasonably good people, and some other things. But budgeting, that's a foreign thing. We don't need, we're not used to that. And to say somebody to do that, pardon me?
Well, yeah, people don't,
Discipline.
you don't all of a sudden magically, boom, you understand time value of money. That just does not.
Well, you see it in these surveys.
Which is something else that you brought up that's very frustrating to me is within the retirement services industry, but then also even the government as well. The pointing out, okay, we all have this terrible problem. We're not saving enough money. It creates the constant negativity. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think. And then on top of it, they're focused on really the top, on top potential clients or top earners. So you're going to need $2.5 million to be able to go ahead and retire and live the way you're going to want to live. So, and it's interesting because the same people saying that, I bet you drive down into their practice, well, management of expectations, all of a sudden it's going to become, you know what I'm saying? So it's very frustrating.
In large measure, and those are the designs in communicating or messaging by the financial industry that makes it easier for their representatives to tell the story, and it's valid. You do need whatever lump sum to feed off of. However, that's so scary. Most people say, why bother? Why bother? I'm going on vacation. And that's sad because if they were to reformulate or rephrase it and say, hey, you need an extra $500 a month to live on in retirement. Okay, how do I get there? And by having them do the actual work, which is what we do, they do all the work in class. Everything, all our workshops are either 2 or 3 sessions a week apart, each a week. So they've actually, the learning, they do it for themselves, and they've got a product they walk away with. And with not, without any follow-up, unless they want more help, in which case they can call us and we'll give them more guidance. But there's no follow-up sales pitch. The thing I want to make, before I forget, on this theme, it's amazing. We deal with Kroger employees, GM employees, Teamster drivers, people that make 100, 150 a year with overtime, skilled trades guys at GM, the same thing. Kroger people that make 40,000 if they're lucky. That's the top, pretty much. And we've discovered over the years that the folks that make less money are better stewards of their money than the people that feel rich because they're making over 100. They think like they're doctors. They think like they're CPAs and attorneys. They're just lucky the union got them that level of pay. But they're not. So that's all that extra money. They live like doctors and attorneys. We can expect to have that income stream and then some. And it's a sad thing to see them all, the last 2008 thing, bank collapse in the markets, we saw a lot of bankruptcies by those very high net worth people for those very reasons. And here's another last story. We were doing a workshop. We're doing a workshop, setting up some workshops. We do a lot of work with libraries. These are free, and we promote them, and we get a few people that show up. More and more, it seems, since they've learned that there's not a follow-up sales pitch. We had up to 45 people in Rochester Hills, which is great because they've established they will not allow anybody to do seminars that's got a sales agenda. Even if they say, I'm not going to sell. No, you're a salesman, so you're not doing it for free. We do it for free, and we're not selling. Bloomfield Hills, we're trying to get a program down there, and the lady has since retired, but she kept telling me, she says, no, we don't need any financial literacy. This is Bloomfield Hills. All our people, they got big homes. And I really could not be adversarial. I couldn't say, lady, they don't own any of that stuff. A lot of people are living at the edge. Anyway, so.
I want to share a quick comment with you. In my life career, so to speak, I'm retired, been back working in different companies. I used to do corporate recruiting at Michigan State University as a Sears store manager. And a comment from a young lady that I eventually put into the apprenticeship program has kept with me for almost 10 years. When I was interviewing her, I said, how are you doing financially? And she said, well, I'm about 50K behind on my student loans. So my life is going to be interrupted for the next 6 or 7 years. And what she meant was that everything that she wanted to accomplish was going to take 7 years to pay these debts off. And that continues through. So when that young lady was 29 years old, she's really going to be starting life financially after she, probably one of the few, felt that she owed that money back. And she had a plan already set up. But the comment to her was that she was going to have her life set back for 7 years. Really extraordinary. I kept that in the back of my head. And that's a
Especially, she's smart enough to understand.
understand.
The most important thing she has is time.
Yeah, she
The
has.
most important.
Yeah.
And now it's 6 years dropped. Or
Painful,
whatever.
painful reality.
And
Painful
what I don't
reality.
understand is I have some of these.
No exchange for being somewhere, right?
They get this financial aid money, and I don't know how they do it. Is they'll call me, and it won't be a student loan debt, and they'll take that money, they get that check, and they pay their debts with that money. How do they do that?
Well, I don't know.
Just get a check?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. It's a system fraught with, not fraud or anything, but just the administrative chaos that's part of that, and the lack of knowledge and information. And keep in mind that everybody's profiting from all those steps. People have jobs to do this. People make money on the money somehow.
All those loans that
So anyway, the system is stacked. I don't know how you break that up because everybody, bows to the east, whether it's Michigan State, U of M, the universities. Great. That's fine, but getting off track here. Here's the millennials. 47% have debt. We knew that. Gen Xers, even baby boomers are carrying some debt, perhaps residue from a prior life or whatever, but there are student loans abounding. We're just talking about this. 2/3 find it hard to meet monthly expenses. I mean, literally, your example. Half find it hard to make minimum credit card payments. So they have no money. They just got a job. Maybe they made some mistake and bought too big of a car, or maybe rent an apartment as opposed to staying at home, if they could stay at home. And 3/4 are stressed about their finances. I mean, that's a burden that I'm not sure how it goes away. Because the economy is not going to supply the funding for these people to pay those off in any accelerated fashion. I mean, the economy, even if it goes up to stays at 3 or 4% for a couple of years, people are not going to double their salaries to make up for it. So how do you deal with it? That's another symposium someplace else. So the effects of stress. You cannot, as an employer, peek into people's finances and say, how come, what's wrong, Judy? What's wrong, Charlie? Do you owe a lot of money, or you have a lot of credit cards, do you? Is that the problem? Or what is, you can't do that, obviously. But you can have some, what's the proper word I'm looking for? Something that stands in place for it, that absences, overly too absent too many times, they're absent. If they're tardy too often, they take too many sick days because they're so stressed out. Their system, whatever's going on medically, they get more often, they become sick. Poor performance, their job is not, they're not in the 401k. I can't afford to get in the We get this from the guys that are making at GM that were now hired in as, they call them in progression. It's a euphemism for you're not going to get the full deal here, but you're progressing. When they're hired in, you're making like 60, when you're only making $40,000 a year. So not being in the 401k, and this is where we're having some impact, educating people, doing these kinds of seminars focused on 401k participation.
Do you think it's a good idea to have the mandatory enrollment in 401k?
Yeah, opt-out is the way to do it. So everybody's in for 3%, 4%. If you don't want it, because again, it's a nudge factor. You nudge them in there. 2 years later, they've got $10,000. Excuse me, $10,000 or $5,000. They do not understand compounding.
But it kind of leverages that inertia.
Exactly.
You're starting to see a lot more of that, too. Yeah, I thought it was a brilliant idea. It's just you can't opt out, but boom, you're already there.
And it's one way to defeat biases. The bias against, I don't need it, a nudging system. And that's what that is all about. And something that we've also determined, and as an announcement to you folks here, we do a lot of work with ERISA attorneys in 401k areas. We're familiar with them because we do a lot of workshops for 401k plans, which are different than the ones Fidelity or Vanguard does, where we literally get their hands dirty, get the clients or the people to actually mess with their own numbers to see the reality. And the one thing that we've determined, that we found, according to, and we got some legal opinions on this, is that the 401k plan, the plan itself, can finance financial education along the lines that I'm describing. Not a seminar, not this is a stock, this is a bond, this is your retirement, this is the age, retirement age funds and so forth, but to actually pay for a class to learn this stuff at a level that allows them to make decisions. You don't want to put that in the back of your mind. Your attorney, if you're in a plan, the attorney may not realize this, but the Department of Labor actually has sent out a circular exactly on this point that says you can do it as long as you have no other angles to sell them insurance or these other kind of things, which is why nobody's doing it, because everybody else that does financial education has an angle. So nobody's reaching into the space. And then loans from the 401k. When you got people calling up personnel and say, hey, I need to borrow money out, any information which you can get, you're allowed to have that information, will let you know that, these 4 people, they're taking a loan almost every six. They get a loan, they pay it back. They get a loan, they pay it back. They got a problem. So you don't need to to do any more research than that. So that information and the approach of getting that information, which is legitimate and clearly legal, can help you see what the level of financial literacy is where you work. Now, statistics show that a lot of people leave work because a bad boss, they need advancement, they're not getting it. But money is always in the mix. When they get a new job, they don't make less money. 75% of the people that get new jobs make more than they did before. So let's not kid ourselves. Although a lot of the consultants, HR people, or the folks that do the recruiting, I guess it would be, perhaps place more emphasis on the non-financial parts because they know they can't control that, but they can control the other parts. So I'm just saying, I'm not being overly prejudicial of their sales tactics, but they're saying, no, it's a matter of career advancement. So let me find you a better career position. Even though the career they may have now is just the right one, except for some other missing pieces that nobody will stop and pay attention to and correct. Rather, let's just kind of jump ship, go someplace else. But money is one of the reasons. And leaving a company where you're not making as much as you'd like to make, you're not getting advanced to get the higher job, paying job, doesn't fix the underlying problem. Fragility, and this is a lot of really neat research over the last couple of 3 years from, again, the George Washington University and a department in that's called the Global Financial Literacy Center. You Google that, you'll get, and I think I've got a couple of pieces from them in the handouts. They've documented that there are 3 components to fragility. Assets. You got to have assets. You got to have some money. You got to have money in the bank and or in the 401k. You know, if you have good assets, whatever that means, but if you have a focus on accumulating assets, have established some assets, you're less likely to have fragility issues, which means people with low 401k accounts got a problem because they likely don't have money in the bank. They're not putting money in the bank as opposed to the 401k. And they probably aren't investing on their own because that's totally dumb, the tax advantage of the 401k. So that's a problem, a low balance. That's one determinant, a predictor. Debt. Any people that have debt, I mean, you see that with your collections, but people that have debt, now you can have good debt, but nobody ever talks about anymore about the ratios of debt. And people, you know, can have, you have people that have, what, 40, 50, 80% debt ratios. Insane. And yet nobody's there to tell them because they're not going to listen to anybody anyway because they need to borrow that money, and the person loaning the money may or may not be as interested in educating them that you really don't want to borrow this. You don't want to borrow money from us. So that is the key. And of course, financial education. If you're not literate, if you don't understand the jargon, and that's the case, mortgages, you said your collection. But in mortgages, how many of you have bought a house in the last 5 or 10 years or 20 years? Do you read those? No, you don't. But you've made an informed decision. You've got the gist of what you get yourself into, and you know what you can get yourself out of. Come to 2005, 6, and 7, where you were getting these ARMs. Did anybody read the provisions, what happens with the adjusted rate return when the market rates go up? Nobody, yeah, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. You'll be making more money. You have a better job, you know. Those are sad things, but that's the financial education. Budgeting. Who forces people to budget? Mom and dad to their teenage kids, perhaps. Maybe some parents to their older kids. But nobody does that because the parents don't do that. Adults don't do it. Some people do. It's the only way to survive today. So the message of this whole presentation is that employers have a role to play here. People are not going to go to school to learn this stuff. Yes, we have seminars and workshops at OCC. People are not going to call up and say, hey, I need to get better at this. What do you have? Oh, yeah, okay, I'm going to sign up for this class and learn, you know, money management, learn more about investing and all the different types of workshops that we have. They're not going to do that. They're putting in 8 hours a day or more, drive back and forth to work, puts another half hour to an hour of their day. They don't have the time to do this, plus all the other things that are impinging on typical families. So the employer, with the individual being there under the control of the employer, one of the things that we suggested, we haven't heard yet, the union has to approve that along with management, is to let people out an hour early for a 2-hour workshop. They invest an hour, the employer invests an hour. And let's take them through a budgeting workshop. We developed something we call PFM, not PFM. It's money management at a budgeting level, personal money management, something like that. I forget the name now. We keep changing it depending on the employers. But in that class, we call it our Ziploc and pizza class. What we do is we have people that are registered commit to an 8-week schedule. During those 8 weeks, the first week they come in for a meeting. They're allowed to bring, depending on the circumstances, when we do it for the schools, we did one out in Huron Valley, we tell them they can bring their kids because we have room there. We bring some teachers to teach their kids economics. But what we do with the parents is we hand out, first of all, we go through a presentation that elaborates on why financial knowledge is important and how you do these things and what we're going to go over, what you're going to end up with in the class, and how you can learn to project the future financially, spreadsheets. And then as the class ends, we hand them a Ziploc. We tell them now, between now and next Thursday, typically the classes are Thursday, between now and next Thursday, anytime you buy something, put the receipt in the Ziploc bag. Put it in your pocket, your purse, and then bring that back next Thursday. When they come back next Thursday, we have a little more chit-chat about whatever, and then we hand out a form, which is really a spreadsheet with pencils. We give them pencils and erasers, and so now, dump that all out and plug it in on this 2-page spreadsheet. That takes about 20, 25 minutes. And then we have a presentation on something. And we have a sprinkling of different topics like taxes. The other thing that we do, we collect information in the first session to project their future lifestyle based on what they're doing today. And we have them put on paper, how big is your 401k and how much money you have here and there. And the people are saying, well, I don't know. I said, just guess. You should have a pretty close idea. How much is your pension? I don't know. And of course, by having them say, I don't know, allows us to really poke at them and say, that's really dumb. How come you don't know? We're not quite so crass, but that's the message we get across. So that kind of stimulates them to kind of like, and then at that second session, we produce for that second session a report that shows what shape they'll be in when they're 65 based on what they're doing today. 9 times out of 10 is a disaster. And that's the nudge factor that we used. That's a slap in the face. Ooh, I better pay attention. So anyway, we do this every week for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we get 4 weeks of spending pattern. Then we hand them a different form that allows them to say, okay, now you got the history. Let's project the next 4 weeks, how things are going to go. And it's the only way we've found, and we've done, I have a fetish about this kind of stuff. I've dug far and deep, looking everywhere in the world to find a better way. There's no better way. And I'm told by teachers, professional instructors, that getting people to actually use something to write down and document it on their own in a slow, people say, how come we don't have, we don't do this in a lab, in a computer lab? No, we couldn't get time. We lie. We wouldn't give it to us. Oh, gee, this is, but that's how they learn.
Personal investment.
Exactly. And it's real to them. It's real. So anyway, employers can do that in one fashion or another, whether it be to offer the class on site, which we can do after hours on site or at a location that the employer pays for. However, what we normally find, and we found this out with Farmer Jack when we started doing this back in 2000, when we started supporting their 401k, I think it was actually 2001. People would sign up in the stores to come to the workshops. They're free. The employer was paying for it, the 401k. They're free. Out of the 25 or 30 that would sign up from the different stores, we'd get maybe 10 or 11. And we'd ask them, how come, where's Mary Lou, where's Joe, and the people that were from that same store would say, they don't have any money, they didn't want to come. It wouldn't be any good for them. Or others would say, well, they didn't want to buy anything, they don't need any more insurance, they don't need to buy any investments. Because the mindset in the public's brain today is, and this probably was part of this here today, perhaps, is like, okay, what are they selling? What's the jig? What's going to happen here? What's going to be the outcome? What's in it for them? Because nobody's doing what we're doing here. So in that sense, if we were to do that for any employer, the first 2 or 3 iterations, you're not going to get too many people volunteering to take the class. But those that do are typically the bell cows in most organizations. Then they go back and say, hey, what did you buy? What did they make? What did they sell you? It's, nothing. Fool. You should have been there. This is good. This is what we're doing this, that, and the other. So that, I mean, other than the employer, there's nobody else in most people's lives that can impact their financial literacy today. You can't do it through advertising. The state of Michigan got $4 million from the Merrill Lynch issues back in 2006 or 5. Merrill Lynch was sued, and they had to pay some fines. And they were all divvied up across the 50 states. Michigan got $4 million. What did they do with that money? They spent half of it developing programs. And the other half, I'm a little too prejudiced, it didn't do any good. And they have these seminars they put on every 3 or 4 years or 3 or 4 months at Michigan State Management Center. You know, manage your money. Well, the only people that go to those are those that know what they're doing and think, okay, maybe I can learn something more. But the people that need it, so you got to trick them to get them in. And the employer can do that. So, improve financial skills. You got to interrelate these 3 categories and make them part of the whole puzzle. It's what it is. Numeracy. We're not talking about heavy-duty physics, astrophysics formulas here, but numeracy is a fundamental, like walking, okay, like driving. It's a fundamental to all of this, and yet people can't do math, simple math, and that's part of what they get more comfortable doing, understanding how to use just a simple calculator in class. We teach them how on the calculator. Now smartphones can do that automatically, but you can compound with a simple calculator. You'll know how to do that, right? By hitting the top key and you said yes, so I'm glad I pointed to the right guy. Yes, yeah, there you go. There I got the slide rule, right? So anyway, that's a key thing, and it correlates with debt management and wealth. People do not understand compounding. Everybody says compounding is Einstein said it's the best thing. What does it mean to an average person? It doesn't mean anything. Just say, well, that's great. You know, so unless they experience it, you teach them how to do it in class. Have them learn compounding in class. And of course, debt. Just to be able to pay off debt as opposed to just the minimum or whatever. They have no concept of how to, you deal with that, I'm sure. Well, you don't, you collect the debt. You're not you're on the other side. You're the guy you're the one that they hang up on, right? Okay, here's an example of numeracy. 5 people have the winning lottery numbers. This came from a paper done by this Anna Maria Lusardi. She's big. She's at George Washington University. 5 people have the winning lottery numbers. The prize is $2 million. How much will each person get? How much?
400,000.
Half the people got it wrong. 50 years old or better, people that are now in their prime earning years, kids are gone, have all this extra money that they're remodeling the kitchen, the bathroom, building a deck, doing whatever, don't understand that. Can't do the simple math. So, overview, attract millennials, help Gen X see a good future, because millennials, this is kind of like the, what's the term I want to use, an appropriate term. It's like a fatherly thing that a company can do, paternalistic. I'm going to help you understand. You didn't get this knowledge in high school, you didn't get it in college, now you owe this debt, I'm going to help you work through it. There's no magic wand, I'm not going to pay it for you, but it's going to be there, so the quicker you figure out a way out and an expectation by doing math to get you out over the next 3, 5, 7 years. So that's a paternalistic thing that I think can appeal because it shows that you care. And if you really do it, you really do care. Because if you care enough, they'll stay. Likely to stay. The Gen X's, they're into it. How do they see a better future? And the boomers help them retire. Skills need to be taught. These are the different things that people need to become proficient in. These are the skills that everybody needs to understand, and yet few people do. They listen to salesmen. And it's a salesman that explains these things, who, though they may be trying to do a good job, but they're working for a company that's telling them, okay, explain all these things, but come back with a sign app. Or come back with a check. Somehow. So there's an undue influence. How do you design content? The fiduciary standard, the Department of Labor was tasked about 5 years ago with coming up, promulgating a standard, passing it on from legislature to legislate, to say that anybody that's advising people about their qualified or their IRA or 401k money must act as a fiduciary. Now, if you look at that one piece that talks about that, that's in the handout, a fiduciary has to act explicitly in the interests of the consumer. They got to put their interests first. The suitability standard, which is the standard that's typically used by most people, says that, yeah, I'll take care of my client, but my company comes first. Because if I don't bring home the bacon, I lose my job. I mean, that's a reality. So the fiduciary standard was passed. It was supposed to take effect 2018, I think March or April this year. In May, it was being delayed because of court actions. You had busloads of insurance and brokers, agents and brokers going to Washington. The financial industry was pouring millions, lobbying everybody to say no, 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 don't. And they passed it. They finally got respite from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals that said, no, we're going to set it aside. The law that says you got to do this, that was like kicking in, we're going to set it aside because the Department of Labor does not have the authority, does not have the authority to do this. They weren't arguing about the fact that it was the right thing to do, so they don't have the authority. We're going to send it over to the SEC, which is run by the investment community. So that's going away. Now, the SEC promises to come up with standards, but they're not going to be what was originally promoted. Our point is, people, and we teach this, we make a big deal out of this in all of our workshops, people should demand that the people they're dealing with sign a fiduciary oath to pledge this. If they don't do that, then you may not want to do business with them. Because a lot of people will sign the oath and promise to look to be expressly, and there's a piece in the handouts on that. Make it experiential. David Kolb, still alive, living in Hawaii, had an opportunity to talk with him, trying to drag him to Michigan to do a presentation for us. And he says, son, he's like 80-some years, I live in Hawaii. I'm not coming to Michigan. What can you say? But he pioneered the experiential learning model. You can find out more if you dig into this more deeply, but it's hands-on. It sticks with you. You know, you're more likely to remember and actually take action. Incorporate critical thinking. Make sure that people understand, and there's another piece in there that says what makes a critical thinker. And we go through that in classes as well. So we give them those soft tools in addition to helping them grind out the math so that they can actually function. And at the end, explain behavioral biases. There's a little self-exam that you can take in your handout of 10 questions. Where do you fit? What are your biases? You might want to consider that. We use that in class to have people be maybe get a sense of, God, that's real. Yeah, I did everything everybody else did. Dummy. I shouldn't have done that. And that's how people learn. And of course, NIFI protocols, which is the National Endowment for Financial Education, which is funded by the Certified Financial Planning Board, that is really the gold standard in workshops of how they should be done, evaluated, measured, and so forth. How should it be delivered? Well, coaching. A lot of companies use coaches. Coaches work with people that have problems. That's fine. You need to have that as part of your AEP program. But the point of our presentation today is to avoid those problems. Have people learn not to have a need for coaching. Plus coaching, you can only do one at a time. So you can't have you can't hire enough coaches for all the people that may need a coach. web-based content. That's great for people that know what they're looking for and understand what's being said to them through the screen. But it does not always result in action unless the person is knowledgeable enough. PowerPoint presentations, the same thing. If all you're doing is explaining some stuff, everybody's listening, lecture-oriented, they're taking notes, handouts, it doesn't mean action. Half an hour, a day later, half of the material is lost unless you have some mechanism to keep it live. Seminars and lectures with workbooks, that's a little better. That's what the state of Michigan did. They developed, with that money, a workbook and a presentation. Well, nobody wants to go to those. And they can't drag people to them because even though they're free, at the libraries they do them, but they also don't have subject matter expertise along with it. It's people that basically walk people through the workbook. And people have questions. If you're not a CFP to answer those questions, or a knowledgeable person, a CPA perhaps, or CHFC, or somebody that's knowledgeable, and we certify all of our trainers, although for the time being I'm the main trainer for all these things. And of course the multi-layer, experiential, hands-on is the thing that we believe very strongly in. Employee engagement is critical. Let me go back, make a couple of points. It has to do with the soft things, the understanding of a person's, the perception of a person's relationship with a company. When a person realizes that their life is connected to the employer financially, and the money that they get from the employer is related to their job description and ROI that somebody figured out for that job. So as long as they realize that, it's not it's not one against the other, but it's a relationship. And a lot of what we do is try to stress, particularly with the UAW, where a lot of guys come in kind of animated about GM, about the man, about management. No, stop. And we try to educate them that this is how it is. You have a relationship, and it's a good one. If you do your job well, if everybody does their job well, the company will prosper. And that's a point that's not always made, and that's part of the engagement. And that nature, the notion of helping people understand their circumstances and being a part of that equation, because most young employees are not going to necessarily listen to their mom or dads. A lot do, but not. So the employer has the opportunity to kind of like force the issue. So look, you will sift through this, and you will learn a few things. What you do with it is your own business. But if they sit through our workshops, that experiential component nails it most of the time. So we talked about fragility. We talked about the skills that lead to fragility and how this helps or hurts productivity and retention because of the stress, and improved financial skills is good for business. I'm at the end of any other questions? Was this, I'd like to, what's your reaction to this? Should we do this again? We're planning to kind of do, this is our first time we're doing this presentation. UHY was instrumental in kind of talking the chamber into publishing this and putting it on. So we're going to be looking for more venues to do it, because it's raising the alarm, particularly to employers, to HR people.
This is a great topic, and something beneficial for all. Unfortunately, I think it's a topic that maybe a lot of people are embarrassed about, maybe.
Well,
But I think it's great. And I hope more employers would do that for their employees. Because there is a need for what you do, and I am thrilled to do it.
well, more and more.
Your company should be in our building, next door to us.
Where's your building?
We were in Shelby Township. We had vacant. There was a vacant office downstairs. We used to pray that somebody like your company would be downstairs from us. Because when people would come in to pay, there would be somebody down there. But we moved to Warren. Now we have a bankruptcy attorney next door to us.
Well,
What's the end result that you're looking for? Do more seminars?
do more seminars to the extent we attract people that are part of an employer group to be introduced to their HR people to tell this story one-on-one?
I think the issue that you run into, and looking at it from the standpoint of marketing, when the flyer came out on this, I think it was still a little ambiguous as far as what the content of this was. And even this morning as I'm leaving the house, I'm looking for a sales angle.
Really?
I one thing I wanted to take out of it, and I'm a little surprised at the content and how valuable it is. And I think that there's a lot that the chamber can do for you once they have a full understanding of what this is and the value that it has. Even getting with certain people in the chamber and bringing it to their networking groups, they could put together a venue for all the networking groups to sit down and listen to this. It can be extremely valuable to them because of the contacts that they have and how far out and how big that web is. But even going deeper than that and working on the marketing to clarify exactly what the content is getting it out, and even with, I mean, you had Mike Kramer here this morning, you have Mike Weatherly over there, which are pretty big voices for this chamber that can get that information out to the value of that to bring in a bigger audience. And I think that that's the issue that you had today, is that it was a little bit ambiguous. I know I'm talking too much.
That's right.
But that it was a little bit ambiguous and people didn't really see the value of what was coming into this particular seminar. I think that content is extremely valuable.
Well,
I'm thinking maybe a short video.
of this kind of, just a few, maybe 5 minutes.
Even putting a short video together to put on the site to kind of promote exactly what this is and to bring people into it, and having some ambassadors out there promoting it also can fill this room.
Or even a testimonial from some of the class attendees. A testimonial would be enhancing.
That's what we were rolling on there before. I don't know if you saw that. Kind of got a little glitzy because we were supposed to stay on, but it stopped at some point. But those were testimonials from. Okay, good, great input, and we taped it, so we'll be able to maybe chop it up a little bit, edit it, give 3-4 minutes of that video, and then we can that might be. I'm glad we brought.
With the right marketing, you can fill this room very easily. Very easily.
Well, that's encouraging.
There's actually, maybe it's just my company, but there's a little bit of hesitancy to getting involved in this. I knew exactly, I had a pretty good understanding, Ted, of what the presentation was going to be about. Yesterday, I went to my HR director and said, listen, instead of going to my typical brag meeting, I'm going to go to this seminar on how to improve financial literacy, and maintain retention. He goes, oh, very interesting. And I said, well, would you like to come? He goes, when you get done, bring that back to me so you have something to bring back. So I said, okay, fine. But I was somewhat taken aback by that because I thought as an HR manager you might have some interest in doing this because you're always looking. My marketing team is totally different about that. They go, yeah, great, I'm going to come, right? So I'm going to bring the package back, and I was surprised. Do you experience that? There's a little bit of a...
HR people are so overwhelmed with the main task of recruiting.
Especially this time of year, because they're in open enrollment this time of year.
Oh, that part, yeah, that's yeah.
Their overall tasks it's really tough to get them corralled.
Do you have a minimum that you work with when you do these programs as far as employees?
I mean, probably one person wouldn't make sense, but
No,
a lot.
I have another organization that I deal with. It's in property management. I'm thinking maybe they might be interested in your service to offer them.
We're open, really. We have no minimums. We're missionaries in this thing.
Because they own several apartment complexes, and maybe that's something they want to offer to their employees.
Yeah, we're really.
Cards
There's cards of.
back there?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. No, we've been in the.
Interested in speaking to that group.
Absolutely, yeah. We have an investment business. That's how we built what we built, and we use education to build our business. I've now pretty much cut myself away from that. My son runs the company, and we built a Chinese wall that says we're not doing this to shill for the company, and we're not. Plus, I got to do something. I'm not going to retire, so this is my gig. So yes, would appreciate any people that you think, any other groups that you think might find value in our presentation, regardless of size. Many years ago, we did a seminar back in the 80s, actually late 80s. Spent a lot of money, big hall, got one person. One person was the right person. Turned out to be the right person. So I believe in luck and karma. I think we'll get there. And my hope is over time to train more people in this to create this, to build this financial literacy. In fact, at some point we're going to be opening up a curriculum at school to train people that want to become advisors, fee-only advisors, not commission. The insurance industry and the investment community is having a hell of a time recruiting people because nobody wants to go work there. And they came to me, a couple of schools came to me, could you design something so that we can get some folks to recruit? You know, we'll pay for the tuition, they'll pay for the tuition. And I haven't said no, and I'm not going to say yes either, because I'm not going to do that. We will train people that are not encumbered by the need to sell a product. Okay, like when you go to, back in the day when you used to have to do oil lubes and replace the plugs, things that cars don't need anymore, they're not trying to sell you stuff. A good mechanic won't. It's the same thing in the sophisticated space of finance. It's the same thing. If somebody's not trying to sell you, but generally tries to help you, like your doctor, who's not trying to hustle pills or surgery. Anyway, I'm getting carried away. I'd appreciate your comments if you've had a chance. If you want us to, pardon me?
I love your passion.
Well, my wife says, what are you doing that for? It's so early. I said, go back to bed.
I love